I have an illness, and it's a disorder. It's a blood disorder, and it's an autoimmune disorder.
What is it called?
It's called myasthenia gravis. It's considered to be fairly rare, and generally I don't have any symptoms from it, but occasionally I get a flare up. And basically, what it affects is the connection between the nerves and the muscles, and it causes a weakness. For me, I don't have many flare ups. It's kind of rare for me to even have a flare up. But when I do, I have, it mostly affects my eyes. It's an ocular weakness. But once I had a flare up which affected my muscles and specifically just affected my lips and my jaw.
Oh, I'm
And
sorry to hear that.
when that occurs, I have a real weakness in the jaw muscles and in the embouchure.
That sounds so difficult, Tom. I mean, and especially with you saying how unpredictable this is. So it sounds like specifically when you had the flare up that was affecting your lips, that was especially tough. Can you tell us more about how that affected your playing and what you did?
When this occurs, it affects my embouchure in my lips. And my doctor, who was a neurologist, they specialize in treating this, treated me with medication, but it took a long while for the medication to take effect. In fact, when I had issues with my eyes, it was really just a few weeks. But with my lips and my jaw, it went on for 4 months. And in 4 months, I couldn't play at all. And basically, when you don't play, you lose the muscle memory, and you lose the embouchure ability because you have to rebuild it. And I couldn't play my clarinet. I couldn't play with any of the venues that I play with. I play with an adult symphony orchestra, and I play in church venues, but couldn't do anything for 4 months.
That must have been terrible. I mean, that affects you, not only physically, but mentally, spiritually, financially, even. How did you overcome?
Well, what I did, and I had help from my teacher in this regard, what I did was to first look at my mouthpiece and the reeds that I was using. Because I was used to playing on a little bit of an open mouthpiece, and I was using a fairly decent strength reed, a 3.5. And what I did, and this was guidance from my teacher, I went to a mouthpiece that had a closer facing, and I reduced the reed strength. I went from 3.5 to 2.5, which reduced the pressure that I needed to apply from my lips, which are really the platform for the embouchure, and my jaw pressure. And then once I had done that and could get notes out, because I really couldn't get any notes out, I was like a beginner. I was very frustrated. But once I did that, I could get a open G in the staff. I could play that. But it took some effort. And when I started to practice again, my teacher recommended that I just play long tones. And for the first 2 or 3 weeks, all I played was long tones to rebuild the strength in my embouchure. And what I did, because in the clarinet, I guess design, if you will, I played only in the shallow mute register, the low register. And I started with open G in the staff because that has the least amount of resistance. Because the lower you go, the more resistance you have, and the more air pressure and embouchure you have to apply. So I first started with low G, and then I added chromatically all the way down to low E, about a day or two at a time. And once I had started that process, it took me several weeks to be able to get the Chalamus register to speak for me. I did not play in either the clarion register, the middle register, or the altissimo register, because that takes more embouchure strength. And I wanted to make sure that I was building my embouchure properly. And once I could do a C scale down from the G all the way down to the Chalamus register, and then all the way down to low E, I started playing a chromatic scale. And I did it very slowly. And I did this in such a way that I used a metronome. I did the same thing when I was doing the long tones one at a time. And I just
How long would you hold the tones for? What did you do?
I tried to hold the tones about 4 beats with the metronome. But it requires a lot of patience because I set the metronome on a very, very slow speed. The intent was not to build speed, it was to build embouchure strength. And the way you do that, quite frankly, is by holding the notes and not focusing on speed. So once I got the long tones working properly, then I went to a 5-note sequence of a chromatic scale, 1 beat at a time, using the metronome, starting on low E, and then going 5 notes at a time up the chromatic scale. And once that was working for me, and I still stayed always in the clarion, in the Chalamus register, I started to add some other exercises. And one of the things that I found to be very helpful was a method book by Jean called Vade Mecum. In the first couple of pages of that particular method book focuses on starting with the low register and doing some exercises to build some technique, but also it allows you to go up the chromatic scale one at a time. And it helped me to build the coordination between my embouchure, my airspeed, my tongue placement, as well as the fingers, working technically in conjunction with the embouchure. Sounds like I was, starting all the way back as a beginner, but basically that's what you have to do. And
it sounds like it took a lot of patience, as you said, to start rebuilding from the beginning.
And the process requires a lot of patience, and just making progress, even though it's slow, is progress. Once I got the Vade Mecum working, and each one of these little stages takes about a week to 2 weeks. And then I added in the Behrman method book. And I started doing scales. Again, focusing on connectivity of notes, the smoothness of playing, not fast, again with the metronome. And once I was able to do that, most of my embouchure issues, my technique was regained and restored. That whole process, from the time I started the long tones until I was able to get to the point where I was able to play again, took me about 3 months. And I was able to do this in such a way that I was able to return to playing with the adult groups that I play with, and also to play in church again and play some other venues. And I basically was able to get back to where I was before I had the episode. It was frustrating. My situation is kind of unique as far as the illness is concerned, but I think it is applicable to just this approach that I use is applicable to anyone who hasn't played for an extended period of time, has lost their embouchure strength, and want to rebuild themselves. And the lesson I learned was be patient and focus on just building this, the ability to play with your embouchure and your technique slowly. And in that process, I have to admit, I found some things that I was not doing correctly even before I had the episode. Playing slowly sometimes brings out issues that you overlooked. And I felt like, quite frankly, after I had gone through this process, I was actually playing better than I had played before. So that's kind of the story of what I went through and how I rebuilt myself.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just having the patience and going back over those skills, and then we learn about some of those old bad habits that we may have had too. It was interesting you were talking about some of the adaptation you made with the mouthpiece facing and the reed that your teacher had suggested. Do you still use that? Did you go back to your old setup? What is working best for you now?
Actually, I was able to go back to almost my old setup. I have decided that the mouthpiece I was using had the one before the episode.
Tom, you're gonna have to repeat just those last few things again because it froze. I don't know.
The mouthpiece that I was using had a facing an opening that was 1.13. What I went to get some help with the mouthpiece, I went to a mouthpiece that I had that had an opening about 1.08 or 1.09. So it was a little closer facing. So it didn't require as much pressure. And the reeds that I was using, I used Van Doren's 12s, and I went from a 3.5 to a 2.5. During the process, once I was able to play again, without having the issues of impairment of my embouchure and the strength that I had, I went up to a 3 reed. I'm still playing on a 3 reed, but I went back to a mouthpiece that was a little more open, 1.13, and my tone is fine, my intonation is fine, and I find I control the mouthpiece and the airspeed with this setup, and I'm happy with it. And I'm probably going to stay with the 3 reed for a while. I don't think it's really something that is due to the weakness that I had. I just feel as though I have a little better control, just generally from the setup that I'm using now. The mouthpieces I returned to, but the reed is just a little softer than what I was playing before the episode.
Another thing I wanted to ask you, because the nature of your disease, there's such unpredictable flare-ups that could happen. And that's really a tough concept to deal with. And I'm sure there are others out there that have some illnesses that it's a little unpredictable what might happen. So how do you feel about if something like this happens again? How do you feel about how you're going to approach it, or what you might do differently or the same?
Well, my doctor came up with a different kind of medication. It's quite frankly an infusion medication. It's called Vivigard. It's specifically aimed at myasthenia. Other people wouldn't have to deal with that. But it's much more effective than the medications I had before. And I haven't had any recent flare-ups of any type. But if I did have another flare-up that affected my embouchure, I'd basically do the same thing. But I think it would probably, based on this new medication, I think it would take less time for me to rebuild the embouchure. And what I do, before I had the episode, which affected my embouchure, I wasn't really playing every day. I was playing as I could, which might be 3 or 4 times a week, not including rehearsals. But now I play every day. And I think that is helping me quite much in terms of maintaining my embouchure. And that's true for anyone, whether they have a weakness or not.
That's
And
really
I expect,
important.
playing every day is important.
The last thing I wanted to ask you, because I'm sure when you were working so hard to rebuild with all the frustration, when you were just at a really low point and getting frustrated and just maybe perhaps wanting to stop or quit, what was the thing that really kept you going and kept working at it? Because you had to work so hard.
Well, several things. My wife gave me a lot of encouragement to continue playing. I am retired, and at this point, clarinet is a real passion for me. It has been all my life. I've been playing for a long, long time since I was in high school. So since I retired, it became a large part of my life. But the encouragement from my wife, the encouragement from my teacher, and my teacher, worked with me every week. And people at the venues where I was playing also gave me a lot of encouragement. And what helped me was I was making progress. Once I started a plan, you have to have a plan, and then you have to stick with the plan. And when I saw improvement coming from the plan, it helped to bolster my morale. And obviously, once this occurred and started, initially, it was depressing and frustrating. But in life, I've always tried to have a positive attitude. The glass is half full, not half empty. And I felt really convinced in my mind that I could get back to playing the way I'd been playing before, at the level that I was been playing, the standard that I applied to myself. And it worked. But it's not easy at all. It affects you, physically, it affects you mentally, it affects you spiritually. And I also did a lot of praying, I am a spiritual person. And all of those things taken together helped give me the confidence and the strength to continue the process.
Sounds like it really was just all the support and all the things that you were able to put together to really help you get through this part. So I really appreciate you sharing your story with us today. I'm sure it's going to help a lot of people because everybody has, a lot of different illnesses or injuries that they're dealing with and have to go through a similar process. And that tenacity that you had really helped you get through as well. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, thank you.